This isn't going to be the announcement I'm going to make following this video. This video is a lot different. I was to have an interview at 11 o'clock today. I haven't heard anything from the producers now. And I'm going to go through something that's probably going to shock a lot of separatists here in Alberta. And I hope conservatives, liberals, NDP, Green alike are paying attention, because I've really hit the nail on the head on this. I'm a pioneer on doing this kind of research. It's a culmination of taking actual history, taking economics, looking at corporations over the last 200 years, which many powerful corporations still exist today. So one of these groups that I was to be in a debate discussion today, and that was to be held in California via live. Apparently I'm not in it. I'm not mad at the producer, but I'm pretty upset with the Democrats right now, and I've really hit the nail on the head, like I said, on a lot of issues. And we're going to go on a few of those right now, and I'm going to make my position clear and where I am. So the first in my notes is Cascadia independence. For those who don't understand what the Cascadia independence movement is, this is more of a Democrat ideology that's been brought forward. 1 minute here. You go. My cat never ever wants attention, but whatever it is, when I do Facebook Live, she's front and center. I don't know why. But we're going to get back to Cascadia now. There were two corporations in early Canada and American history, and when we get into the War of Independence for American liberation from Great Britain, we look at the Hudson's Bay. Oh, you get. Shoot. She's just going to be a brat. No, I don't know why. She's, Okay, so we get into American independence, and we have what the Americans had to do against Great Britain to win that independence. Now, two corporations, we know the Hudson's Bay, but there was also a Northwest corporation that was finally eaten and consolidated by the Hudson's Bay. When we get into settlers in Canada, why this is important, Americans had their revolution, they defeated the British. Democrat, Republican alike, and all Canadians, that War of Independence was brutal. There's a great video, doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, of what the Americans had to do in that fort to hold that American flag as the British just pounded them and pounded them into the earth. And they couldn't believe that after that day, that heavy bombardment on 2 days, that American flag stood, but it didn't stand. All the American soldiers were killed, and new ones would come to lift that flag and raise it again. They took that bombardment, and when they ran out of soldiers, it was the American settlers, the American peasants that got up and raised that flag. Men, women, and children died. The death toll and the pile of bodies to hold that flag up was just insane, but the people did that. If that isn't a statement of independence, I don't know what is. But the British gave up, and little did they know, it never came out till after the fact, that they had killed so many Americans that day. Now, why I get into this is because the British, when it comes to British Columbia, and Alberta's having a real hard time with British Columbia right now, and it actually goes back into these two organizations, Cascadia and Cascadia. American history is really strong on this. The Americans understand it, whether you're Democrat or Republican, they understand it very well. Canadians, however, not so much. And, you can make fun of Americans and they're uneducated and everything else, but in this situation, that's not the case. Now, Democrats are pushing very hard down south for environmental, and they want this new UN agenda, the illegal UN agenda, the non-binding that member states have come up with. But I promise you, Republican, Democrat alike, Cascadia was a great trading partner of Alberta because we fell in that Hudson's Bay. Now, on the 49th parallel, something I know quite a bit about because I live on it, Edmontonians live on it. Stony Plain, it runs right through Stony Plain where I grew up. That was the division that the Americans, after independence, they were broken. Britain pounded the hell out of North America, USA. They pounded them into the dirt, but Americans won. They stood their ground. Following that, of course, we have Mexico and the Spanish And at that time, the Spanish had a revolution to try and take southern portions of the USA. The USA signed an agreement with the British. They signed the 1818 Treaty Convention. They gave the 49th parallel, and they drew a line because the Americans could no longer defend the First Nations that they had agreed to through the Company Hudson's Bay, where there were no settlers in Canada. Okay, so everybody, there were no settlers in Canada. USA, a different story, but in Canada, that British North America, Canada, before we became a country, there was no settlers inside those territories, and that included, at that time, 1818, British Columbia. There were forts, there was the trading companies, but they worked with First Nations. The Americans did, where the British were slaughtering, and, you know, previous Spanish history too, they had slaughtered the First Nations in British Columbia and pushed them into Alberta and northern BC and all the really remote, treacherous places of BC. That's where the First Nations ended up. But most ended up in Alberta. They had to cross the mountains, run, flee, and get into Alberta. Now, the Hudson's Bay, they defended the First Nations, believe it or not. They didn't allow any settlers in Canada. But in 1818, the war down south with the Spanish and the Americans, after the War of Independence for America, greatly weakened, went to war with Mexico, and they signed the 49th Parallel Agreement. And they had to, because they just didn't have the resources to defend. There are 58 First Nations who you can go to in British Columbia right now. I'm just starting to get into that. I've been very quiet about that. I've been looking at that for the last several months as well. Since my resignation, I've been going, because the First Nations in Alberta and our cross treaties, treaties 10, 8, 7, and 6, all go into some parts of BC, and I've been looking at that. So especially with Treaty 8, Treaty 6, and Treaty 5, they're really pressing. So I've been really heavily involved in that and looking at what's happened to First Nations. So every Canadian knows British Columbia never made any treaties with BC besides what Canada delivered post Confederation and Alberta's Confederation. And that's when you get into only Treaty 8, 7, and 6 that really affect BC. And of course, everything along the coast, there were no trees. There's 2 tiny ones, but the First Nations, 58 of them, were grossly and inappropriately extinguished out of the area, have never had any rights or any claims to anything. And it's disgusting and sick, really, but that's what the British did, and that's what you call British Columbia. So First Nations are very upset about this. They are not on board with Cascadia and what Cascadia is trying to do. So everyone knows all this environmental activism, it's all to build the Cascadia, which goes all the way to Northern California. Marcus Ruiz Evans, who's in for California independence, they call it Cali Exit. They have nothing to do with this north and south split. That is Cascadia, a false narrative. It's something like Wexit. They have strong monies. It's kind of the right and left. There's a Wexit, and then there's Cascadia. Now, this is all, you know, false narrative. None of these groups have gone to First Nations. They've never looked at what has to be done. They've definitely not talked to law enforcement and those old agreements. They've never looked at Cascadia, even though Cascadia is the one who won and prevailed, and that's the American independence. They're the ones who won, and they delivered. I'm going to get into Vermont now, and there are 650,000 people in Vermont. It is a very small state. It's dying. Alberta has a great trading relationship with Vermont, and historically, Vermont has supplied us with significant areas of engineering, believe it or not, even though it's the home of Bernie Sanders. For those who look past that and look at the economics, you find that Canada, you know, specifically Alberta, has had a great trading relationship with Vermont. Now, why? And that goes back to Cascadia and the Hudson's Bay. When you look at a lot of these states, like why would Illinois have such a powerful trading agreement with Alberta? Well, that's because of Cascadia. And this is the American independence that won. And we look at where these states come from and how we ended up the way we are, you know, and these are Democrat states, believe it or not. But so this is really not partisan. This is just true history, and it was the free peoples of North America who won this and did these great things. They didn't get as far as they would have liked to, but our trading relationships exist today. Alberta and Vermont have a great trading relationship, even though it's not as powerful on energy, and we see this in that Vermont's dying right now. They've lost a lot of jobs along with Alberta because they support our tech and engineering industries so very well. We employ lots of people from Vermont. However, as our energy industry has collapsed, so has that industry for Vermont. They don't populate, not for a very long time. They haven't been able to populate. They're a dying state. The cost of living is so very high. Alberta has the energy that Vermont needs to sustain itself. However, we can't get that established. There's a lot of left agenda. They say that per person per capita right now, Alberta produces the most carbon. There's a reason for that. Alberta is taking on a massive amount of carbon for a massive percentage of American population right now. And really, we're keeping North America green. Alberta's doing that. We're carbon capturing for vast amounts of American population. Look at California. There's more people in California than there is in Canada combined. And just the province of Alberta is carbon capturing for the state of California at an unmeasurable amount of rate. We're doing it for Illinois as well, which is a massive population and center hub of American energy coming from Alberta. We are the little engine that could and did and is doing right now. We do that, and America utilizes Alberta in such a massive way that, you know, people don't really want to look at. Now, the Cascadia and what's happened with this environmental push and the money that's coming from, you know, parts of California too, and it is a rich community, but it's not the average California, right? We're looking at wealthy people with deep ties to some very old organizations, and they're trying to bring back that push to remove the First Nations and all their rights from BC. And it's not the same as America. It's not even close. And it's not right. The grave human rights violations are being pushed by this Cascadia. You know, we're Macedonia. That was the American Revolution. Macedonia won, and then that goes all the way to the east. There's many Democrats and Republicans tied to that. It's a huge amount of population in the USA, and Alberta feeds that. We do an excellent job. We have high technology. That lot comes from America. You know, so now I'm going to get into Hawaii. Hawaii, another state that's dying right now. We have absolutely barely anything in trade. Alberta's trade was huge with Hawaii. We did a lot for them leading up to 2000. That's all been cut off, and the American federal government has taken over feeding Hawaii, even though Hawaii is not growing either. It's much like Vermont. They're dying off. They were a great trading partner of Alberta's, but they've become victim of the environmentalism too. Their population is dying, believe it or not. Both Hawaii and Vermont are losing standard of living since they've lost those trading rights with Alberta, and you can thank environmentalism for that. You know, Hawaii is very isolated. The people of Hawaii can't afford the greater standard of living. They're not populating, they're not having children at the same rate they did. It's getting worse for them. You can look at history. This isn't a lie, and it's because of what's been taken away from Alberta. And you can look at that. That's the reality. So thank you, everybody. I would have loved to have this debate, and maybe still 11 o'clock I will, but I think that the big players, the big environmentalists, have put a kibosh on me speaking out, because I come always with facts, with data. I don't support Republican, Democrat, Conservative, Liberal, Green, NDP. I come with the actual facts, the actual economics and trade relationship we have, and I try hard to give that nonpartisan. I am a separatist, but I'm going to tell you right now, I do not support Cascadia, not at all, just like I don't support Wexit. These are fundamentally flawed organizations that don't really look at the real picture, whether that's left or right, however that comes out to you. True independence and a true measure of what can be done goes by what is and what's there, and this is what's there. American independence won. Cascadia won, not Cascadia, and I would never support Cascadia, which means I do not support NDP. I do not support the Green Agenda, and I'm getting stronger, and I will take on the Democrats that Justin Trudeau's hired to spread that false narrative in Canada. And I promise you, going against American independence, going against Cascadia via forecast Cascadia is the wrong way. It is totally against the Americans, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, even though many Democrats are trying to lead that flagship. But, you know, be warned, liberals, you're going against America, and I promise you, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. You've made a deal with the devil. You did the wrong thing. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I'm going to upload this to YouTube, this video. I'm going to share it with Marcus Ruiz-Evans. And, you know, Marcus, I hope we get to have that talk. And I hope California understands Cascadia is not your friend. Mexicans, Cascadia is not your friends. Check out Britain versus Spain and look at your history, and you're going to find out you're no different than the First Nations of BC and what's happened to you. Yes, you were strong with the Spanish at the time, but they are not your friend. The environmentalism and First Nations as well. I'm going to be educating you in BC, all 58, just as I did with Alberta, and I'm going to get there, and I'm going to, you know, if there's a will, there's a way. I got 3 years to get this done, and I don't need money. I just need the will and minds of good people and honest research and honest economics. Thank you, everybody, for today. And like I said, Marcus, I'm going to get this to you. I don't know what's happened. I suspect, but you know, not every Democrat is your friend, and I hope that this finds you well. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Bye now.